Hey there. Welcome to a deep dive into the world of OFAC compliance. We're about to unpack some seriously important stuff that impacts businesses and even shapes global events. You ever imagine accidentally doing business with someone on like a restricted list?
Oh, yeah.
That's where OFAC comes in. It stands for the Office of Foreign Assets Control, and it's part of the U.S. Treasury. Their job. Enforcing economic and trade sanctions. We're talking potential penalties, restrictions on business, the whole 9 yards. Today, we'll equip you with the essential knowledge to navigate this complex landscape.
What's fascinating about OFAC is that it goes way beyond just following rules. It's about the U.S. wielding its economic power to influence international relations and even safeguard national security.
That's right, it's a big deal.
The-
So where do we even begin with something this intricate?
Well, the foundation of OFAC compliance lies in sanctions screening. Imagine a super exclusive club with an incredibly vigilant bouncer. That bouncer is checking every single person against a list of those who are barred for various reasons.
Hmm.
That's essentially what sanctions screening is.
So that's where the specially designated nationals list comes in, the infamous SDN list.
Exactly. The SDN list is like OFAC's no-entry list, and it's not the only one. The government also maintains a list specifically for known terrorists, called the SDGT list, and another for those trying to evade sanctions called the FSE list. These lists help prevent funds from reaching those who intend to cause harm or undermine U.S. foreign policy.
Makes sense you wouldn't want to accidentally fund someone on those lists.
Absolutely not. And here's the kicker. These lists are constantly being updated. Imagine that bouncer using an outdated list. It wouldn't be very effective. That's why relying on old information in OFAC compliance is a recipe for disaster. You need up-to-the-minute data to stay compliant.
So how does this screening actually play out in the business world? Where does it happen?
There are two key areas. First, there's customer due diligence, or CDD. Think of this as thoroughly vetting your clients before you do any business with them, making sure they're not on any restricted lists. Then there's transaction screening, where you scrutinize individual transactions to make sure they don't involve sanctioned parties or prohibited activities.
So it's a double layer of protection, like a security checkpoint for your business dealings.
Precisely. And ideally, these checks are happening in real time, both when you onboard new customers and when money is moving. Think of it as a 247 security system constantly monitoring for potential risks.
Okay, that's starting to paint a clearer picture. But let's talk about these sanctions themselves. Our listeners shared some source material that mentioned different types, right? What are the key distinctions there?
You're right, not all sanctions are created equal. They exist on a spectrum of severity. At one end, you have comprehensive sanctions. These are like a total lockdown. Think Cuba or North Korea. They're pretty rare, though.
Wow, a total lockdown. That sounds intense. So what are the more common types of sanctions?
The more common type is targeted sanctions, which focus on specific individuals, entities, or sectors within a country. Take Iran and Russia, for example. There are restrictions on certain dealings, but not a complete economic shutdown.
So it's not always black and white. It sounds like there are shades of gray depending on the specific sanctions in place.
That's a great way to put it. And then we have a whole other layer of complexity with what are called secondary sanctions. These can actually target foreign entities doing business with those already under sanctions, even if those foreign entities are not directly subject to U.S. jurisdiction.
Wait, hold on. So a company in, say, Europe could get penalized by the U.S. for doing business with a sanctioned Iranian company, even if that European company isn't directly targeted by U.S. sanctions.
That's exactly right. It creates a sort of ripple effect, extending the reach of U.S. sanctions far beyond its borders.
Now that is fascinating. It's not just about who you're directly doing business with, but also who they're connected to. It's like you need to map out your entire network right.
You've hit the nail on the head. And to make things even more intricate, there's OFAC's 50% rule, which really highlights how interconnected global finance truly is. This rule throws a wrench in the works for a lot of people. It basically states that if a company is 50% or more owned by a sanctioned party, the entire company is considered blocked, regardless of its own activities.
Okay, so let's say you're a business owner and you're looking to invest in a company overseas. On the surface, everything seems fine, but then you dig a little deeper and discover that a majority stakeholder is on the SDN list. That's a game changer, right?
It absolutely is. It underscores the importance of thorough due diligence. You can't just scratch the surface. You need to peel back the layers and understand the entire ownership structure before engaging with any entity, especially in international business.
So it's like investigative journalism for business. You have to follow the money and uncover those hidden connections.
That's a great analogy. And remember, due diligence involves more than just plugging names into a database. It's about gathering information from various sources verifying identities,
Hmm.
understanding the nature of the business, and truly assessing the risk.
You're reminding me of those true crime documentaries, where investigators piece together a puzzle using financial records and hidden transactions.
Exactly. Meticulous record keeping is crucial in OFAC compliance. You need to document every step of your due diligence process. This proves you made a good faith effort to comply with regulations, even if you unknowingly make a mistake,
And how long do you need to hold on to these records?
for at least 5 years. Remember, OFAC investigations can happen years after the fact. If you can't provide adequate documentation of your due diligence, you could be in serious trouble.
And speaking of trouble, what happens if a company violates these sanctions? What kind of penalties are we talking about?
The consequences of noncompliance can be severe, both civil and criminal. We're talking hefty fines that can be crippling for businesses, restrictions on operations, and even prison sentences in some cases.
So it's not just a slap on the wrist. These are real-world consequences with the potential to damage reputations and bottom lines.
That's right. And here's the thing. Ignorance is not a defense. OFAC expects businesses to be proactive and diligent in their compliance efforts. Even accidental violations can lead to penalties.
So for those listening who are trying to wrap their heads around this world of OFAC compliance, what's the key takeaway? What's the most important thing to understand?
The key is to remember that OFAC compliance is not just about avoiding penalties. It's about aligning your business with broader national security and foreign policy goals. It's about demonstrating ethical and responsible conduct on the global stage.
That's a really important point. It's about recognizing that your business decisions can have far-reaching consequences and aligning your actions with a sense of global responsibility.
Precisely. And it's crucial to understand that the OFAC landscape is constantly evolving. New sanctions are imposed, existing ones are modified. And the geopolitical landscape is constantly shifting. Businesses need to adapt and stay informed.
So it's not a set it and forget it situation. You need to be flexible and keep up with the changes.
Absolutely. And that's where a robust compliance program becomes essential. It starts with a thorough risk assessment. You need to understand your company's specific exposure to OFAC sanctions based on your industry customer base and global reach.
So a local bakery wouldn't have the same level of risk as a multinational bank dealing with international transactions, right?
Exactly. Once you understand your risk profile, you develop tailored policies and procedures. This includes everything from customer onboarding and due diligence to transaction screening and record keeping.
It sounds like having the right technology could play a big role here. Could you imagine trying to manually screen every transaction against those massive, ever-changing lists? It would be a nightmare.
You're absolutely right. There are specialized software solutions designed to automate much of the sanctions screening and compliance monitoring process. This makes things much more efficient and reduces the risk of human error.
But technology is just one piece of the puzzle, right? You still need human expertise to analyze the results, interpret the nuances, and make those judgment calls.
Of course, technology is a powerful tool,
Hmm.
but it can't replace human oversight and critical thinking. That's why training is so crucial. Everyone involved in international business transactions needs a solid understanding of OFAC compliance
Hmm.
and their role in preventing violations.
It sounds like it's about creating a culture of compliance that permeates the entire organization. It's not just about having policies. It's about making sure everyone understands and follows them.
You've got it. And it's also about staying informed. OFAC regularly publishes updates and guidance, and there are tons of industry resources and legal experts who can provide support. It may seem overwhelming at first, but with the right approach, businesses can navigate this landscape successfully.
It's like learning a new language. It takes time and effort. But once you master the basics, you can communicate effectively and avoid those costly misunderstandings. So we've talked a lot about the technical side of OFAC compliance, but I want to shift gears for a moment and talk about the human side of things. Earlier, you mentioned how OFAC's actions can have ripple effects across the globe. What does that really mean for everyday people?
That's a crucial aspect to consider. While economic sanctions are often necessary tools of foreign policy, we need to be mindful of their potential impact on ordinary people. They can limit access to essential goods and services, disrupt local economies, and create hardships for those who are already struggling.
It's a good reminder that these decisions made on a governmental level have real-world consequences for individuals and communities around the world.
Absolutely. So as you delve deeper into this topic, I encourage you to consider those broader implications. How do economic sanctions impact international relations, global trade, and the lives of individuals? It's a question worth pondering.
I think you've given our listeners a lot to think about. It's been a fascinating deep dive into a complex but vital area. I'm definitely feeling much more informed about OFAC compliance and its significance on the global stage.
Me too. It's a topic that often flies under the radar, but it's crucial for anyone involved in international business or finance, even if it's just to understand the broader implications. Now, before we wrap up, there's one more area I think is particularly fascinating, especially given the rapid advancements we're seeing in technology.
You mentioned the rapid advancements in technology. What's caught your attention in terms of OFAC compliance?
It's the digital age, right? We've got cryptocurrencies, the metaverse, and transactions are happening at lightning speed. So the question becomes, how do you enforce sanctions in this rapidly changing landscape? How do you track cryptocurrency transactions? Or ensure compliance in a virtual world?
It's like the Wild West of finance out there. It sounds like OFAC is going to have to evolve to keep pace with these new technologies and the challenges they present.
Exactly. And that makes it all the more crucial for businesses to stay informed and adapt their compliance strategies. What worked 5 years ago might not cut it in today's world.
So if there's one key takeaway our listeners should remember from this deep dive, what would it be?
Hmm. OFAC compliance isn't a one-time box to check. It's an ongoing commitment, a journey, that requires constant vigilance adaptation and a willingness to learn and evolve alongside the ever-changing global landscape.
It's almost like a mental workout for your business. You've got to stay sharp and keep flexing those compliance muscles.
I like that analogy. And remember, while we've covered a lot of ground today, there's always more to explore. That's the beauty of this field. It's complex, it's dynamic, and it's constantly pushing the boundaries of what we know about global finance and international relations.
Well said. A huge thank you to our expert for guiding us through this deep dive into OFAC compliance. It's been an eye-opening journey, to say the least.
It was my pleasure. I always enjoy unpacking these complex topics and sharing insights that hopefully empower our listeners to navigate this world with confidence and a sense of responsibility.
And to our listeners out there, as always, stay curious, stay informed, and happy diving.